Darian Cole hated delays, but missing his private jet because of a last-minute board meeting in Midtown had him doing something he hadn't done since college, booking a seat on an Amtrak train. He adjusted the cuff of his Brioni suit as he stepped onto the platform, ignoring the curious stares from other passengers. A few recognized him CEO of Cole Dynamics, billionaire tech mogul, Forbes cover boy last spring, but he didn't care. He just wanted to get to Boston without dealing with another helicopter reroute or traffic jam tarmac. Coach or first class? The attendant asked. First, Darian muttered, tugging his leather duffel higher onto his shoulder. He climbed aboard, settling into a window seat in the quiet car. The train rumbled, and just as he pulled out his laptop, someone dropped into the seat beside him. "Excuse me," he started, not even looking up. "I think this one's mine," a woman said, breathless, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. Her voice was soft but firm. Darian looked up then and froze. She wasn't dressed like anyone else in first class. She wore a faded denim jacket over a navy sweater, her boots scuffed, a worn leather messenger bag slung across her body. Her hair was pulled up in a messy bun, glasses perched on her nose. She didn't even glance at him again as she pulled out a book. And for some reason, Darian couldn't stop staring. He cleared his throat. "You sure you're in the right car?" She tilted her head toward him, raising a brow. "You always interrogate strangers on trains?" He blinked. "Only when they sit next to me." "Well, good news. I'm not a criminal. Just a teacher with a discount ticket and a dying phone." She smiled faintly, then turned back to her book. Darian leaned back, watching her from the corner of his eye. She didn't recognize him. She wasn't impressed by his suit. And for the first time in weeks, he felt normal. "Curious." "Darian," he said after a moment, offering his hand. She eyed it, then shook it. Harper Rowe. "You're a teacher?" "Middle school. English and history." He chuckled. "Brave woman." She smiled. "You have no idea." They fell into a surprising rhythm. She asked him what he did, and he answered vaguely, "Software development." She didn't push. "Why the train?" she asked at one point. "You look like a guy who doesn't wait for anything." "I missed my jet," he said casually. She blinked. "Your jet?" "Yeah," he said, tapping his laptop. "Works insane." "Must be nice," she said. But there was no bitterness in her tone. "My big splurge this month was an almond croissant from that French bakery in Union Square." He laughed. "You've got good taste." Harper shrugged. "It's the little things, right?" They talked for most of the ride. She told him about the kids in her class, how one of them was obsessed with ancient Egypt and another had just started reading Shakespeare. He found himself telling her things he usually never said aloud, how lonely it was at the top, how exhausting it was to constantly keep up appearances. At one point, she nudged his arm. "You know, for a tech guy, you're actually kind of human." He grinned. "Thanks. I think." The train slowed as it approached Boston. The mood shifted. She began packing up her bag, and Darian felt something strange disappointment. "Where are you headed once we get in?" he asked. "Back to my apartment. I have lesson plans to finish." He hesitated. "Want to grab a coffee? There's a place near South Station." She paused, looking at him. "You don't even know me." "I know I've been smiling for the past 3 hours, and that hasn't happened in months." Harper stared at him, then slowly smiled. "Okay. One coffee." They stepped off the train together into the cool Boston air. She looked around and spotted the cafe across the street. Darian was already pulling out his wallet. "Let me," he said. "Not a chance. I agreed to coffee, not a date." He raised a brow. "What if I wanted it to be both?" She gave him a look. "You're not used to anyone telling you no, are you?" "Not really," he admitted. She laughed. "Well, get used to it." Inside the cafe, they sat across from one another at a small window table. Darian listened as she talked about her students, her passion for literature, how she worked summers at a bookstore just to be around stories. "You're really into this," he said, sipping his espresso. She nodded. "Books saved me. I grew up in foster care. Didn't have much, but I had stories. They made me believe in more." Darian's heart twisted. "You deserve more." She looked at him, serious now. Don't say things you don't mean. I mean it. They talked until the cafe closed. Outside, she pulled her jacket closer around her. I should go, she said. Can I see you again? Harper hesitated. I don't usually do this. Me either, Darian said. But I want to. She studied him, then nodded once. Okay. But no jets. No fancy restaurants. He grinned. Deal. When she walked away, Darian didn't go to his hotel. He stood on the sidewalk watching her disappear down the block, heart pounding in a way it hadn't in years. He took a train instead of flying. And somehow, the woman beside him had just stolen his heart. The rain came down in sheets 3 nights later, blurring the Boston skyline outside Darian's penthouse windows. He stood barefoot on the marble floor of his living room, staring at the untouched dinner on the table behind him. His chef had prepared duck confit and truffle potatoes, but the idea of eating it alone twisted his appetite into knots. He hadn't expected her to say yes. When he called the next day after tracking her down through the school directory, something his assistant had warned him might seem intense, he braced for her to hang up. Instead, she'd laughed and said, Fine, but if you try to impress me, I'm walking out. Now she was 20 minutes late. He turned toward the floor-to-ceiling windows just as the elevator dinged behind him. Before he could reach the door, it opened, and Harper stepped inside, hair damp from the rain, cheeks flushed with cold. I know I'm late, she said, breathless. The tea stalled, and then some guy knocked over my umbrella. He stared. She stopped talking. What? You're here. And you look like you're trying to figure out if I'm real. I was starting to think I made you up. She gave him a look. I'm soaked, freezing, and I just argued with a man holding a ferret on the red line. I'm very real. Darian stepped back to let her in, trying not to stare as she peeled off her jacket. Beneath it, she wore a simple black top and jeans. Her boots squeaked against the tile. Your building has a doorman who looks like he moonlights as a movie villain, she said. I'll tell him you said that, he replied, closing the door behind her. The scent of rosemary and citrus wafted in from the kitchen. I told you no fancy restaurants, she warned. We're not in one. You have a chef, don't you? He hesitated. Only when I forget how to boil water. She arched a brow. Which is always? More often than I'd like to admit. She wandered into the living room, eyeing the enormous abstract paintings on the wall, the low-slung Italian furniture, the grand piano gleaming in the corner. Let me guess, she said. You play. Terribly. Then it's just for decoration? Mostly for my mother. She insists every Cole should know at least one instrument. She turned to him. You just said your last name. I did. You're that Cole. He didn't answer. She crossed her arms. You left that out on purpose. I didn't want you to treat me differently. You thought I would ask for a yacht? I thought you might do exactly what you're doing now. Which is putting up walls. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I'm not impressed by money, Darian. I noticed. That's why I wanted to see you again. He motioned to the table. Can I at least feed you? She looked at the linen napkins, the crystal glasses, the candles flickering low. If there's caviar anywhere in that meal, I'm leaving. No caviar, he said quickly. I swear. Dinner passed with more ease than he expected. She told him about a student who tried to plagiarize an essay by copying from an online fanfiction forum. He choked on his wine. I gave him a passing grade for creativity, she said, but only because he wrote a love letter to Cleopatra. Ambitious, Darian said, grinning. After the plates were cleared, Harper wandered toward the piano. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys but didn't press any. You really don't play? She asked. Not since I was 17. What happened then? My father died. Playing felt like pretending things hadn't changed. She turned to him, her expression soft. I'm sorry. He nodded, surprised he'd said it out loud. Harper sat on the bench and tapped a few notes. You think your mom would be okay if I butchered something? She'd probably love you for trying. She played a clumsy version of Clair de Lune, missing a few notes but laughing through the mistakes. Darian leaned against the wall, watching her, something heavy and unfamiliar pressing into his chest. When she stopped, she glanced back at him. I probably owe Debussy an apology. He'd forgive you. She stood and walked toward the windows. You can see everything from up here. I used to think the view would make me feel powerful. Now it just makes me feel far away from everything. You really know how to kill a mood, you know that? He laughed quietly. She turned to face him. Why me? What do you mean? You could be with anyone. Models, actresses, people who live in this world. You're the first person who made me feel like I wasn't performing. The humor in her eyes faded slowly. You don't know me, Darian. I know you stayed late at school yesterday to help a kid rewrite a poem. I know you put cinnamon in your coffee even though you pretend it's an accident. I know you still carry a library card. She blinked. I noticed things, he said. The space between them tightened, but she didn't look away. You're dangerous. Why? Because you make it easy to forget how different our worlds are. He stepped closer. Then let's make our own. For a moment, Harper didn't answer. Then she touched his arm, brief and tentative. I should go. I'll walk you out. They took the elevator down in silence. Outside, her rideshare pulled up, headlights slicing through the rain. She hesitated before getting in. I'm not sure where this is going. Neither am I, Darian said. But I'm not ready for it to stop. She opened the door, then paused. Next time, I pick the place. I'll be there. As the car pulled away, Darian watched the taillights disappear into the storm. He didn't turn back toward the building for a long time. For once, he wasn't thinking about board meetings or stock prices. He was thinking about a woman who'd played Debussy badly and made it sound like hope. Harper pressed the bell beside a rusted doorframe in Cambridge, shifting the tote bag on her shoulder. The building's stoop was crumbling and the scent of baked bread drifted from the bakery below. A moment later, the door creaked open. You're late, her roommate, Simone, said, leaning against the frame with a paintbrush tucked behind her ear. I brought you that pistachio croissant you like, Harper replied, holding up the brown paper bag. Simone snatched it and stepped back. Bribery accepted. Harper stepped inside the apartment, dropping her bag next to an overflowing shoe rack. The walls were lined with Simone's unfinished canvases, and a record player hummed in the background. She set her coat on a chair and sat on the arm of the couch. You look like you just came back from Narnia, Simone said through a mouthful of pastry. I went to his place. Simone froze. You mean the guy from the train? Tech guy. Darian. You went to his place? Simone narrowed her eyes. What's the catch? Harper toed off her boots. It was surreal. There's a piano that looks like it belongs in a concert hall, and his windows are so tall they might as well open to another planet. Simone looked intrigued. Did he try anything? No, Harper said quickly. He cooked. Or, well, someone cooked. We talked. He listened. Simone folded her arms. You're not built for this. I know. I mean it. You fall too hard, too fast. You romanticize people. He's not a fantasy. He's a billionaire. It's literally the most unrealistic thing about him. Harper exhaled and stood. I'm not asking for permission. I didn't say you were. Simone softened. Just, don't get swallowed. That life? It doesn't bend for people like us. I'm not trying to fit into his life. I just want to know him. Simone looked unconvinced but didn't argue. Harper spent the next few days trying to stay grounded. She graded papers, stayed late helping with the school's debate club, and avoided checking her phone too often. But Thursday afternoon, just as she was packing up her desk, a knock came at her classroom door. She turned. The janitor peeked in and said, There's a guy downstairs asking for you. Did he say his name? He nodded. Said he's not leaving until you come down. She rushed down the hall and pushed through the front doors into the courtyard. Darian stood beside a black town car, holding a cardboard tray with 2 steaming cups. Are you stalking me now? she asked, walking over. I brought tea, he said, handing her one. And I had a meeting nearby. Thought maybe you'd want a break. She eyed the cup suspiciously. You remembered I don't like coffee? You said it tastes like burnt dust. I did, she said, surprised. You were listening. I usually do. They sat on a bench near the school's fence. Children's laughter echoed from the playground on the other side. I wasn't expecting to see you today, she said. I wasn't expecting to want to see you this much, he replied. She looked down at the cup in her hands. There's something I want to show you, he added. Tomorrow, if you're free. She hesitated. Is it another penthouse? No. No suits. No chefs. Just something personal. She studied his face for a moment, then nodded. Okay. The next day, he picked her up in a Navy SUV and they drove in near silence out of the city. The skyline faded behind them, replaced by winding roads and towering trees. After nearly an hour, he turned onto a gravel path that led to a 2-story house with peeling white paint and a porch swing that creaked in the wind. Harper stepped out slowly. Where are we? My mother's place, he said. She's not here right now. She's in Italy with my sister. I wanted you to see where I came from before everything else. Harper glanced at the house. You grew up here? Until I was 16. After my dad died, we moved into the city. He pushed open the door. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lavender and old wood. The furniture was mismatched. A half-finished jigsaw puzzle sat on the coffee table. Feels real, Harper said. It is. He led her through the rooms, the living room with the crooked lamp, the kitchen where the cabinets still had chipped paint, the small study lined with books. This was his, Darian said, pausing at the door. My dad's. He used to fall asleep with a pen in his hand. Harper stepped inside, trailing her fingers along the desk. He was a novelist, never published, but he taught me everything about telling the truth, even when no one's listening. She turned to him. You miss him. Every day. They walked outside, down a narrow trail that led to a frozen pond. A wooden bench stood near the edge. I used to skate here, he said. Badly. Harper sat, watching her breath fog in the cold air. Why bring me here? Because this is the only place that ever felt like mine. And I wanted you to know that I'm not just suits and jets and headlines. I'm this too. She looked at him, her voice quiet. You didn't have to prove anything. I wasn't trying to. I needed you to see me. She reached out, slipping her hand into his. They sat in silence, the wind rustling through bare branches. Later, back in the city, he walked her to her building and paused at the bottom step. I want more of this, he said. Not just moments. I want to be part of your world. She bit her lip. It's messy. Unpredictable. Small. It's real, he said. And I'm tired of pretending I'm not starving for real. She didn't say anything for a full minute. Then she leaned forward and kissed him soft, brief, but enough to make his breath catch. Okay, she whispered, and before he could say anything else, she turned and disappeared up the stairs, leaving him standing beneath the street lamp, heart racing, knowing something had just shifted forever. The wind coming off the harbor was sharp, carrying the scent of salt and the distant hum of ferry horns. Harper wrapped her scarf tighter around her neck as she stepped onto the rooftop of the old theater where Darian had told her to meet him. She had no idea what to expect, and that unnerved her more than she wanted to admit. At the far edge of the roof, he stood with one hand in his coat pocket, the other holding a small black case. Behind him, a long table had been set, draped in linen and lit by glass lanterns. There were no servers, no background music, just the sound of the city stretching out below them. You picked a strange place for a date, she said, walking toward him. You said no restaurants, he replied without turning. This place was abandoned for years. My foundation restored it. The view's better than any skyline bar. She glanced at the table. There's only one chair. I didn't plan for dinner. He opened the black case and pulled out a leather-bound book. The edges were worn, the pages yellowed. He handed it to her. She blinked down at the cover. This is your father's. I had it rebound. I've read every page twice, but there's something inside I never noticed until last month. He stepped back and motioned for her to open it. She did, slowly. Inside the front cover, a folded sheet of paper was tucked between the binding. She pulled it out, unfolding it carefully. It was a letter written in looping script. To my son, who will one day forget that love matters more than legacy. Her breath caught. I found it after you left last week, Darian said. He wrote it when I was 14. I don't remember him ever giving it to me. She looked up from the page. He said what you do doesn't define who you are. That love is the only risk worth taking. I think he knew I'd need to hear it eventually. Carefully, she refolded the paper and slid it back into the book. Why give this to me? Because I'm done building walls around things I'm afraid to lose. He stepped closer, the city lights flickering in his eyes. I've lived my whole life chasing control. But with you, I don't want control. I want chaos. I want mornings that start with burned toast and nights that end with you reading aloud from bad novels you secretly love. She laughed quietly. I don't read bad novels. You read them when you think no one's watching. She didn't deny it. You've been watching me that closely? Only because I haven't been able to look away. He reached into his coat pocket again, and for a moment she thought he might pull out something extravagant, a necklace, a set of keys to some gleaming apartment, another one of those grand gestures that never really felt like her. Instead, he held out a silver key on a plain ring. I bought the bookstore on Tremont, the one that's always struggling to stay open. Her eyes widened. You what? I'm turning the upstairs into a reading center for kids. You once said stories saved you. I want to help you give that back. She stared at the key, her voice barely audible. You did all that for me? I did it because you made me remember what it means to believe in something real. And because I want to build things with you, not for you. She took the key, her fingers shaking. I don't need promises, she said. I don't need a mansion or a last name that makes people whisper. I just need someone who won't disappear when things get hard. I disappear when I'm afraid, he said. But I'm not afraid anymore. She stepped forward, resting her forehead against his. Then don't let go. I won't. The lanterns flickered as the wind picked up. Somewhere below, a siren wailed and the world kept moving, but up here, everything had gone still. He kissed her, slow and certain, the kind of kiss that didn't ask questions or demand answers. It just was. And when they pulled apart, she didn't step back. Later that week, she stood behind the bookstore counter, cataloging new arrivals, when the bell above the door jingled. Darian walked in, holding a paper bag. You brought lunch. You left your scarf at my place. She reached for the bag, but he held it just out of reach. There's also a surprise inside. I'm starting to worry about what your definition of surprise is. He set the bag down and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a photograph, grainy, black and white, taken decades ago. A man with familiar eyes sat in front of a typewriter, smiling. Harper looked up. My mom found it. Said he used to talk about opening a bookstore one day. He never did. But maybe this is close enough. She touched the edge of the photo. You're finishing something, he started. I think I'm starting something of my own. A knock came at the door. A group of children spilled in, led by a woman holding a clipboard. One of the girls tugged on Harper's sleeve. Are you the owner? Harper glanced at Darian, who nodded with a grin. Yeah, she said. I guess I am. The kids clustered around the shelves as Harper led them toward the back, promising story time and snacks. Darian hung back, watching her move through the room with ease, her voice lifting and her laughter echoing off the walls. He pulled out his phone and sent a quick message to his assistant to cancel the investor dinner. This was where he needed to be. As the children settled on the rug, Harper looked back at him from across the room. He met her gaze, and she smiled, not the careful, guarded smile she'd given him on the train, but something open and sure. He crossed the room and sat beside her on the floor, folding his long legs awkwardly as she handed him a picture book. You're reading The Prince, she whispered. Only if you read The Dragon. Deal. And just like that, with a mismatched crowd of kids and a stack of stories between them, Darian Cole, the man who once believed he'd have to fly to stay above everything, realized he'd found the one person who made him want to stay grounded forever. Harper stepped into the conference room, nerves rattling beneath her skin as she adjusted the hem of her forest green dress. The bookstore's first official literacy fundraiser had drawn a larger crowd than anyone expected. Local politicians, educators, foundation heads, and even a few literary figures she secretly admired. Despite the buzz of voices and clinking glasses, her eyes searched for only one person. Darian was speaking with a pair of donors near the windows, dressed in a navy suit that fit him like it had been tailored by someone who understood not just measurements, but presence. When he caught her gaze, his expression shifted with something quiet and sure. He excused himself and crossed the room without hesitation. "You look like you're about to recite Shakespeare and faint afterward," he said, sliding his hand gently into hers. "I'm terrified of public speaking. You know that." He leaned in just enough so only she could hear. "You read A Dragon's Voice to 30 kids last week. I think you'll survive this." "That was a fictional dragon. These are real people. With money. They're here because of you. I'm still not used to this." "You're not supposed to be," he said, brushing his thumb across her knuckles. "You're not supposed to change. That's what makes you the reason all of this works." She glanced toward the podium. "I should probably go up there before I pass out." "I'll be waiting right here," he said. "And if anyone blinks too slowly, I'll pretend to donate twice as much just to distract them." That made her laugh, and it steadied her as she stepped up to the microphone. The room quieted. A few heads turned expectantly. Harper cleared her throat and began. "I never thought I'd be standing in a room like this. I didn't grow up with gala invitations or donor lists. I didn't grow up with much at all. But I had stories. And stories, I've learned, are the most powerful currency we have. They give us imagination when the world offers nothing. They teach us empathy when we've never been shown it." She paused, looking out at the faces before her. This bookstore was never about saving a building. It was about creating a place where a child could pick up a book and see something better for themselves. A place where a girl like me could walk in and feel like she belonged somewhere. She looked down at her hands for a moment, then back up. "I owe that belief, that hope, to someone who reminded me that the right person doesn't try to change your story. They help you write a new chapter." The audience broke into gentle applause. As she stepped down from the podium, Darian caught her around the waist and pulled her into a quiet corner of the room. "I didn't know you were going to say that," he said. "I didn't either." He touched her cheek. "You've never looked more like yourself. And you've never looked more like someone who's about to do something dramatic." He tilted his head. "What gave me away?" "You're holding something behind your back." He revealed a slim navy box and opened it. Inside was a necklace, a delicate gold chain with a charm shaped like an open book. She reached out and touched it with trembling fingers. "There's an inscription inside," he said. She opened the charm. Inside, carved in tiny, precise letters, were the words, "The best stories begin when you stop trying to write alone." She blinked fast. "You're going to make me cry in front of all these people." He lifted the necklace and fastened it around her neck. "Then let's give them something to really stare at." Outside, the night had softened. The guests had thinned, many lingering near the entrance or sipping wine under strings of lights. Darian led Harper to the courtyard behind the bookstore, where a small garden had been planted beneath the glow of Edison bulbs. "I have one last thing," he said. She raised a brow. "Another charm? A castle? A pet elephant?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. "I filed the paperwork yesterday. The bookstore's now under your name." Her heart stopped. "You're giving it to me?" "No," he said. "I'm returning it to the person who's been building it all along." She stared at the envelope. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll stay. With me. In this life we're building." She looked up at him, eyes shining in the soft light. "I've never been more sure of anything." He wrapped his arms around her, and they stood there for a long moment, the kind of stillness that only came when the noise of everything else finally quieted. "Marry me," he said suddenly. She froze. He didn't step back. "I know it's fast. I know this isn't how people usually do things. But I don't want usual. I want you. Always." She searched his face, overwhelmed by the weight of the moment, and then, without hesitation, nodded. "Yes." The word was quiet but absolute. He kissed her, and behind them, someone clapped. They turned to see Simone standing just outside the back door, arms crossed, grinning wide. "Took you long enough," she said. "I was starting to think I'd have to propose for you." The weeks that followed unfolded like a story neither of them had dared to dream. There was no massive wedding, no magazine spreads. Instead, they married in the garden behind the bookstore, with fairy lights overhead and Harper students reading poetry between vows. Simone cried through the entire ceremony. Darian's mother flew back from Florence and insisted on baking the cake herself. They moved into a brownstone near the Charles River. Darian kept his company but stepped back from the headlines. Harper expanded the literacy center upstairs and created a scholarship fund for future educators. Every Sunday, they hosted open mics in the bookstore, and every Tuesday, they closed the shop early to dance in the aisles between the shelves. One night, long after the last customer had left, Harper was shelving a new arrival when Darian walked in holding 2 mugs of tea. "Book club's canceled," he said. "Why?" "Because we're going out. I'm in pajamas." "You wore worse on the train where we met." She laughed. "That was not worse. It was adorable." They walked hand in hand to the river, the city soft around them, the world quieter than it had ever been. "You know," she said, pausing to look at the water, "this life, it's not what I expected." He kissed the back of her hand. "Neither are you." And as the lights danced across the water and the wind tugged at her scarf, she leaned into him, knowing with complete certainty that her story had finally found its forever.